Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, a crowd-supported, crowd-driven feature where we respond to your questions on everything from economics to political philosophy to culture, all those things that matter to us in our life together as citizens. And today's question is on a sensitive topic, and it comes from someone who's asked that not even their first name be used. It concerns medically assisted dying. And they say that although in principle they don't have a problem with it, they were recently involved in a case where somebody requested permission to die, was granted it, and then in fact passed away before any procedure took place. And they said it made them very uncomfortable in a way that even seeing a loved one die a natural death of old age, painful as it was, didn't disturb them. And I think this is a very important question. And to anticipate, I myself am opposed to euthanasia, including medically assisted dying. And the reason that I'm opposed is I think that there is something fundamentally contrary to human dignity in the business of deciding that some lives are no longer worth living and terminating them. And that might seem like an odd way to approach the problem, because the whole purpose of medically assisted dying is to preserve human dignity. That's what its proponents say it's for, and I see no reason to doubt them. I'm not questioning their sincerity. I'm simply suggesting that they have hold of the issue from the wrong end. And in saying so, I know I go against this prevailing popular wisdom that places enormous emphasis on human dignity, and rightly so, and therefore says that if a life doesn't have dignity, it's not worth living. And this argument actually underlies some of the support for abortion. That is particularly the idea that we should abort severely handicapped people. And thus phrased, it might sound crude or even like eugenics, but it's not about improving the breed of the human race. It's about the idea that past a certain point, a life with diminished capacities is worse than no life at all. And in fact, you do see, for instance, a dramatic decrease in the proportion of babies born today with Down syndrome. Most of them are aborted. And yet you will certainly hear from people with Down children that they are a great delight in their lives. But I'm not here to talk about abortion. I'm just pointing out that this idea that some lives are not worth living is very widely held today. And of course, when you talk about medically assisted dying, that is euthanasia, where there's no question about voluntary participation, the argument could be made that unlike the case of aborting the handicapped, these are people who themselves hold this view and have therefore made a conscious decision that when their quality of life deteriorates past a certain point. And I am not denying that in cases of severe illness, and particularly dementia and some of the illnesses associated with the end of life, there does seem to be a dramatic decrease in dignity. There's certainly a dramatic decrease in function and of enjoyment. So the argument is this is a person who has decided they would be diminished lower than zero if they got past a certain point, and therefore they do not wish to do so. Why is it not in accordance with human dignity to respect their wishes? And I think that the only explanation for the discomfort people feel, even if intellectually they say they're in favor of it, is that if we discard the notion that all human life is, well, I can't say the word sacred because many people aren't believers, but if we discard the notion that all human life is inherently worthwhile and start making judgments, it is impossible to retain those judgments in the hands of the person making the decision. And in fact, with medically assisted dying, you need to have outside judgments. Yeah, your life either at this point is not worth living, or at a certain foreseeable point in the future will not be worth living. It has other people deciding that you or somebody else leads a life that is worse than nothing. And I think it is also pernicious, though well-meaning, I want to again to insist, because it suggests that the purpose of life is kind of a hedonistic one, that we're meant to be having a good time. And if we're not having a good time, we should leave, essentially. And in doing so, it deprives suffering of any redeeming value. And yet, it has always been regarded as an essential attribute of humanness, of the admirable sort, to bear suffering stoically. Again, the religious might say, offer it up to God. The non-religious might say, this is character, to triumph over adversity. And of course, it's easy to say all this stuff when it's not you, whatever the suffering may be, and particularly the suffering, as I say, that comes with dementia at the end of life. Because among other things, there's no cure. This just gets worse until you die. And yet, I think that the questioner's unease is well-founded. It's one of those truths written on the human heart, what we can't not know, in J. Budziszewski's phrase, that either all human life is special or no human life is special. That either dignity in the face of suffering ennobles us, or else we are simply animals. That with the best of intentions, medically assisted dying, even when it's not euthanasia performed on somebody without their consent, even when they are of sound mind when it happens, or were of sound mind when they said, when I reach a certain point, I want that procedure, it nevertheless diminishes us as human beings to the point that we do lose our humanity. And I think that somewhere in our minds or in our hearts, we all sense that truth. That doesn't make the dilemmas around end of life any easier. It doesn't diminish the pain. But in giving the pain value, I think it gives human life value. And so many well-meaning measures tend to lessen or eliminate the value of human life. And in my view, medical aid in dying is one of these. If you have a question that you'd like to ask the professor, this URL will tell you how to do it. If you find the feature worthwhile and you'd like to support it, click here. It'll take you to my website where you can make a one-time or a monthly pledge. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.